The story for today is Paul Bunyan by Stephen Kellogg. And he has really detailed illustrations. Do you remember that? So this is this is called a tall tale. That means it's not true, really, but it's kind of fun to think that it might be true. And people tell it to explain how certain things happened. And this is how someone thought certain things might have happened in the United States. So Paul Bunyan was a boy that started on the East Coast in Maine and moved all the way across the countries, and things happened to him as he moved across the country. So let's see what things happened to Paul Bunyan, or that they say it is. So here he is. He's in Maine, which is that state that's clear up here on the East Coast. Clear up there. He moves all the way across the country. All right, there he is as a baby. He's a pretty big baby, right? This is the birth announcement. It says, the Bunyans welcome Paul. And he was born on July 4th. So does that mean he's an all-American baby? He weighed 156 pounds at birth. That's pretty big. Okay. There he is. He's looking out the window. What does he see? All these kitties. So I think he's going to do something about it. You'll find that Paul was a pretty kind kid, even when he was a baby. But he did get into trouble. So here he's coming out to the cow, and all the cats are saying, "Yay, what are we going to do?" They're pretty happy. And he's milking the cow to give the cats some milk. Paul Bunyan was the largest, smartest, and strongest baby ever born in the state of Maine. Even before he learned to talk, Paul showed an interest in the family logging business. He took the lumber wagon and wandered through the neighborhood collecting trees. Are these trees that are okay to collect for the logging business? I don't think so. They're apple trees, not logging trees. Oh, what about this tree? Oh my goodness, what happened when he got it? Look, smash on the church. There were so many complaints about Paul's visits that his parents anchored his cradle in the harbor. So they said, if we put him out in the ocean, maybe he won't cause any trouble. He's feeding his bottle to the seals. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be trouble? All was well until Paul started rocking the cradle and stirring up the waves. What happened when he stirred up the waves? Look, they're coming and they're crashing into the town. He's flooding the town because he's rocking his cradle so hard. Is he trying to be naughty? No, he's just having fun. After his parents had paid for the damage, they decided to move to the backwoods where life would be more peaceful. So they're going to move west, which is what we talked about during our unit concept. Paul loved his new wilderness home. He soon grew into a sturdy lad who was so quick on his feet he could blow out a candle and leap into bed before the room became dark. That's pretty fast. Every day he joined his forest friends in their sports. He raced with the deer and wrestled with the bears. You would have to be pretty big and strong to wrestle with a bear. One morning, Paul awoke to find the world under a blanket of blue snow. He heard a moan from inside a snowdrift, and there he found a shivering ox calf. Paul adopted him and named him Babe. Both Paul and Babe began growing at an astonishing rate, but the ox never lost the color of the snow from which he'd been rescued. As the years passed, the two of them proved to be extremely helpful in the family business. Do you remember what the family business is? It's logging. So look, here's his mom, here's his dad, there's Paul, and there's Babe. So they're pretty big. That makes it easy for them to move logs around, right? At 17, Paul grew a fine beard, which he combed with the top of a pine tree. By this time, other settlers were beginning to crowd into the Maine woods. Paul felt an urge to move west. he said goodbye to his parents and headed out west. Why do you think he felt an urge to move on? Do you remember these ladies and their apple trees? I think he remembered. Paul wanted to cross the country with the best lumberjacks crew available. He hired Ole, a celebrated blacksmith, and 2 famous cooks, Sourdough Slim and Cream Puff Fatty. Then he signed up the legendary lumbermen like Big Tim Burr, Hard Jaw Murphy, and the 7 Hackett brothers. That's an interesting way to cut down a tree. Paul put the camp buildings on wheels so that Babe could haul them from one forest to another. As soon as he had cleared the land, the pioneers moved in to set up farms and villages. So here they come. Those are the Conestoga wagons. So they cut down all the trees, and then the people move in to build a town. On the far slopes of the Appalachian Mountains, several of Paul's men were ambushed by a gang of underground ogres called gumbaroos. Look. Paul grabbed the camp dinner horn and blew a thunderous note into the gumbaroo's cave, determined to blast the meanness right out of them. Think that worked? But to Paul's dismay, the gumbaroos responded by snatching the entire crew. A wild, rough and tumble rumpus began inside their den. Ooh, those are scary looking ogres. Who do you think's going to win, the ogres or the lumberjacks? When that historic tussle was over, the gumbaroos needed 6 weeks to untangle themselves. They disappeared into the depths of the earth, and they've never been heard from since. Paul's next job was to clear the heavily forested Midwest. He hired armies of extra woodsmen and built enormous new bunkhouses. The men sailed up into bed in balloons and parachuted down to breakfast in the morning. Unfortunately, the cooks couldn't keep up. The cooks couldn't flip flapjacks fast enough to satisfy all the newcomers. So here they look at how tall these are. They're going to bed up there, and then they come down in the parachutes to go to work. But they had a problem. They didn't have enough breakfast. To solve the muddle, Paul built a colossal flapjack griddle. The surface was greased by kitchen helpers with slabs of bacon tied to their feet. So it says they might be playing hockey. So they got all greased up with their bacon. Then what happens? Every time the hot griddle was flooded with batter, it blasted a delicious flapjack high above the clouds. Usually the flapjacks landed neatly in a pile beside the griddle, right here. But sometimes they were a little bit off target. So one landed here, one landed here. Oh, they must be in the plains because here's some buffalo. One landed on some buffalo. Paul took a few days off to dig the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes so that barges of Vermont maple syrup could be brought to camp. Oh, look, there's an eagle catching fish out of the lake. So that's kind of one of the parts of the tall tale. So there's some Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River in the United States. And they're saying the way that came to be is that Paul Bunyan dug that out. Do you think that's true? The tall tale. Fueled by the powerful mixture of flapjacks and syrup, the men leveled the Great Plains and shaved the tops off the Rocky Mountains. They probably would have sawed the peak themselves into logs if a blizzard hadn't suddenly buried the entire mountain range. So in came a blizzard. The blizzard continued for several years, snuffing out the springs, summers, and autumns. The crew burrowed into their bunkhouses and hibernated. That's a powerful blizzard. Babe became so depressed that Paul asked Ole to make him a pair of sunglasses for his friend. When Babe saw the world colored green, so they're green sunglasses, he thought he'd stumbled into a field of clover, and he began eating the snow with such gusto that soon the treetops reappeared. At that point, all the pent-up spring times simply exploded, dissolving the storm clouds and the remaining snow. Whew, good thing. Paul and his friends invited some newly arrived settlers to join them in a celebration of all the holidays that had been missed during that great 7-year blizzard. Look, here they come again in their wagons. But they're celebrating Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day. And look, while they were in there, their hair grew long, long, long. They had to get their hair cut. After the festival, the lumberjacks continued their journey, but as they headed through the southwest, the blistering sun and the giant Texas varmints proved to be more of a problem than they had expected. So here's Paul. He's a pretty big guy, but look, is that a giant Texas varmint? Woo! So I told you there was some desert. When the settlers hit the desert, it was pretty tough, even for Paul and his lumberjacks. Travel became so difficult that some of the men began to speak longingly of being buried by a 7-year blizzard or bear-hugged by a gumbaroo. While crossing Arizona, the griddle curled up like a burned leaf, and the batter evaporated. Deprived of their flapjacks, the lumbermen became weak and discouraged. And look what happened. Paul's great axe fell from his shoulders, gouging a jagged trench, which today is known as the Grand Canyon. Disaster seemed certain until Paul came up with a desperate plan. He headed east and found a family that could sell him a barn filled with corn. Babe galloped it back across the desert, and when the flaming sunrise hit that barn, it exploded, and the lumbermen awoke to find themselves in a raging blizzard of popcorn. Dizzy with joy, they pulled on their mittens and began blasting each other with popcorn balls. Pretty awesome when the barn exploded, huh? A westerly wind kept the cooling clouds of popcorn swirling around Paul and his crew until they crossed California and reached the Pacific Ocean. There they are at the Pacific Ocean. Here's the swirling clouds of popcorn. And what's Babe doing? He's swimming there with his green goggles. And Paul Bunyan still likes to play with the animals in the ocean. After he had crossed the country, some say that Paul gave up lumbering and rambled north, searching for new areas of untouched wilderness. With the passing years, Paul has been seen less and less frequently. However, along with his unusual size and strength, he seems to possess an extraordinary longevity. That means he can live a long time. Sometimes his great bursts of laughter can be heard rumbling like distant thunder across the wild Alaskan mountain ranges where he and Babe still roam. There's one last picture I want to show you. So there's the United States of America. Do you recognize it? Here's Maine, where he started out, and there's the East Coast. There's Mexico down here. Here's California. Do you see the shape? So it's showing how he started here as a little boy and he went all the way across the whole United States.